Hi everyone, welcome to the Spark Ninja podcast. In this episode, we're going to play a recording of last night's webinar where Paul and I actually discussed the DPC for Amendment 2 and which comments we felt like making, and some of the other areas that we understand why the regulations are changing. The commenting is open until this Friday. It's Friday the 11th of December. So have a good listen while you're at work or while you're driving around. And if you did want to make any comments on the standard, you can just do a search for the actual BSI site, or you can actually go to a site like the IET where they'll give you a link to get an access to the DPC of Amendment 2. You create a BSI login, and then you find any particular regulation you want to comment on, and you add them. If someone else has done a comment that you agree with, add a comment yourself, because the more comments, then the stronger the argument. Alright, this webinar isn't designed to sway you or give you a kind of a push in any direction. It's just our opinions, and you have your own, and yours are very important. So do commenting if you feel the need to. Alright guys, speak to you soon. All right, so the first one that we've got here, is this more of a comical thing, this one? Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's some new terms in part one, as well as obviously in the definitions, but they've changed the time and trusted term domestic has now become dwelling, and we have now since learned the reasons why, and it is more harmonization across the EU, which uses the term dwelling, which, as you can imagine, is going to make fun with the NIC logos on the side.
Yes, so you've got that here, haven't you? The dwelling installer. No, I don't think that they would do that. I think just the banter brigade would have too much fun with it. But just for anyone watching who's NIC registered, that is a joke. By the way, that is a joke. But I mean, we're not really thinking that this is worthy of making a comment on.
No,
ourselves professionally. No. But if you think there's anything worthy, then add on to that. I think that's just going to creep in. I can understand the harmonisation purpose for this.
Yeah, it's a fun piece. Yeah. It's something to laugh at, but it is what it is. It's just natural progression.
It's just a bit of fun. Now, in the scope, however, we had the addition of the scope 110.1.2 for installation and support of fiber optic cables. Now, some people will be like, well, these aren't electrical systems, they're not cables, so are they within the scope and reach of 7671? So, my opinion of this is the erection of a wiring system would also include fiber optic installations. We'd have to break fire barriers. We'd have to have segregation of cables, because a lot of these systems, while they may not be, current carrying conductors, are still cables that are run through buildings. So considerations need to be made with regards to breaking, again, fire barriers, propagation, erection methods, and a lot of this we may have to think about things like the integrity of the erection methods. It might be that it's a safety critical kind of data connection. So I think that this is a good inclusion. The more that we can do to allow the data guys to be a lot more aware of their potential, of the fact that 7671 is actually within their reach, the better, in my view.
I think it's worth adding, Dave, if anybody wants more evidence that this is a good thing, this premature collapse thing, if you can actually go and see the Shirley Towers photographs where they have been released to the general public, and you can actually see some of the telecoms and various other cables. And it's worth noting as well, Regulation 110.12, it's actually Part 3, Line 3, and it says wiring systems and cables not specifically covered by the standards for appliances, but it also says in Part 5, fixed equipment for information and communication technology, signaling and control. So I think this has just been added as a include fiber as well, because cables are cables. And
it's a cable, isn't it? It's a fiber optic cable.
Yeah, and how many telecoms installers actually give you a certificate at the end of it, as we've said before, that state that they've complied with the premature collapse intent of 7671.
Yeah.
So this hopefully will go some way to improving the industry. So for me, there's no comment on it, but I think it's a fantastic change.
Yes, but we're just adding this because we think it's a necessary change and it's a good one. You may disagree. If you disagree, you can comment on that. I don't think there's any need to reword it either. I think it's fairly clear. I think, as Paul has said, there is a need for the data industry or the data installers to be a lot more aware of how their work comes within the reach of 7671. There's work to be done there, but I don't think the work has to be done here. Okay, with part 2, we're not really going to worry too much about all the definitions that are added with consideration of part 8. We'll talk about part 8 right toward the end, and we're not going to cover all of part 8. We're going to cover more of just a thought process about what part 8 is for, and then we can apply that to all of that, and that includes the definitions. But a couple of other definition changes that we had. One was the consumer unit here, and it's got a key wording change. So was particular type of distribution board comprising a type-tested coordinated assembly for the control and distribution of energy, principally in domestic premises. So what they're doing is the change here is obviously considering the capability of the users. And so they're adding the term ordinary person. That's the proposed change. So ordinary persons aren't exclusively domestic. So does this mean that these boards actually will then go outside of domestic?
There's also one other thing that's been changed, is they've removed reference to fuses.
The fuses themselves, yeah.
So is that the DEFNEL for 3036s? We'll be starting to get rid of them?
Well, again, I mean, it does say in the standard, like any overcurrent protective device, and all of these devices, if they're going to be used where there's ordinary persons, then there should be suitable selection of them, and we shouldn't be able to adjust them. So I think that's latching this. But the removal of the term fuse is interesting. Maybe 3036 is starting to have a bit of an expiry date.
I think one thing we've learned, I think especially in recent years, is you can see the seeds of it, the seeds of intent. So if you remember, 17th edition Amendment 3 introduced the first reference to arc fault, but everyone went mental when it came in the 18th. It wasn't. It was in the 17th edition Amendment 3. So you see where they're going with the direction of the regulation. I don't think this is a bad thing. Don't think at all. It's a bad thing.
All right. Again, this other one here, DSO. Paul, you've been talking about DSOs a lot longer than the regs have.
Yeah, this is my favourite picture, probably for educational purposes of all time, in all fairness, because at the top there you have your traditional generation, transmission, distribution, stepping down, going underground into your domestic home, a lovely traditional one direction source and load circuit known as the national grid. Mm-hmm. And the future journey is not a lovely linear system. It's this complex web of supply, demand, generation across multiple levels. So from the prosumer, which is a new term that they've introduced with cars, PV, battery storage, microgeneration, and even on the commercial industrial front, where you can now easily go out and put a 5 or 6 gigawatt solar array and then knock on National Grid's door and say, I want to plug in, please.
I think one of the key things to understand with this, I mean, this is how we learned it at college. They generate it, they juice it up, they transmit it, they juice it down, then we use it. This starts here, but look, here the power is going both ways, because we're generating at this end and we're offering it back. So it really is an important change of understanding with DSOs.
So Lawrence Harrington, if you don't mind, has asked, where did that picture come from? If I remember rightly, it was Northern Power's example, which they wrote about 3 years ago. As John said, there are videos online where if you Google them, you can find references and videos from the Energy Networks Association talking about distribution system operators. The transition from DNO to DSO was more, you're not a linear supply and demand distribution. You're a smart, integrated, receive, produce, demand, distribute. It's a different phrase to reflect the modern systems. But worst case scenario, if you can't find it, let me know, and I will send you that slide.
Yeah, you've mentioned John. It's probably worth mentioning. I mean, John's just done a video which kind of shows the consumption of power and the generation of electricity, and how we're pushing down the coal and how we're heavily relying on other sources, gas and wind and stuff. And that is all part of this infrastructure. So do watch his content on those. Dokie. We didn't cover part 3 because we didn't really think that there was anything in part 3 that was
pretty much one change.
Pretty much, yeah. We weren't too overburdened with that. We got more interesting stuff in parts 4 and 5. So first thing in part 4 is this rewording of bonding. So I think that they're trying to do is expand on this understanding of metallic. Instead of the wording of metallic pipes just being mentioned in the little part now, metallic pipes are mentioned throughout. there's still some question about the effectiveness of metallic pipes and non-metallic pipes, about extraneous conductive parts. And I'd like us to go eventually down the avenue of us not having a yes or no decision made in the regs, but actually testing them ourselves. I had someone contact me just this week. He had a plastic service coming in, but he wasn't too sure about it because he was told to bond it still. But he carried out tests, and he actually then verified it was, it wasn't an extraneous conductive part, and he was then satisfied. Any questions with this, Paul? I know that there's a next. Or do you want me to move on to the next?
This is kind of the common one that we everybody knows. It's the list of stuff you need to bond. I think they've just reworded it better. To be honest with you, I think it explains it a lot better.
It does. We've added this though.
Oh, yes. So this is the ongoing debate, isn't it? I think it's fair to say, if you remember the picture, that somebody had bonded a bit of plastic pipe, which everybody looks at as just really stupid and dumb. However, and this is a debate going on at the moment in certain online forums, is these plastic pipes, we now may possibly need to understand the makeup of these pipes. As you can see there from the example there, the MLCP pipe, that has an aluminium extrusion as part of its makeup to reinforce it. Aluminium is a conductor. Is there any special precautions we need to understand when considering the bonding? And this has been quite a hot topic of debate, to be honest with you, as to, are we doing any research? Are we looking at this? So this was an extra slide we put in because we thought it's probably really good to actually just throw it out and get the awareness going as to what do we do with it? Do we just assume it's plastic, and because it is plastic, but underneath it can conduct? So is there a potential that at a joint under the ground there could be a transference of voltage and it enter the installation via possibly?
Yeah. So it can. I mean, this outside sleeve is providing some form of protection, but then we have this reinforcement inside. So there is potential for some damage to occur that may not rupture the pipe, but that may expose potentials.
I was looking last night for the electrical dielectric strength of the insulation from the manufacturer. So I was on their website Googling it. I couldn't find anything. But straight away, my brain tells me I want to understand the level of insulation resistance that this affords, and is there a special connection detail? Because at the end of these, they use those pneumatic crimps, and they are metal.
Yes.
So there is a potential for that conductivity. Again, this may people will probably go, well, no, don't be silly, don't be silly. How do you know?
Well, this is the thing. What we don't want to do, and this happens a lot, is we make a change, we make an assumption, and then we find out 3 or 4 years later, actually there was another problem, and we want to try to think ahead of potential problems.
Well, the worst case scenario is somebody will turn around and go, "Oh, this. I've got a really funny reading here," and look at all the bonding and go, "Well, that bond can be disconnected." And then all of a sudden they do a test and all the readings have gone out the window. Why is that? Put it back and go, I'm bonding to plastic. I don't understand. I've reinstated the clamp. Chris Ruddock's made a brilliant suggestion. I wonder if a warning notice should be placed by the water tap explaining that alterations may require consulting with a competent electrician. I think if you're doing a new build, guys, if you're on them, it might be worthwhile getting some samples of the pipes the guys are laying so that you can actually have a look yourself and get a bit more educated on the different types of pipe. And the various protective measures for it. So,
yeah, again, this is particularly this type of pipe, but we need to be more aware of these risks or these potentials. Right. Should we move on? Let me just hang on. Mine says if they have metal crimps on the end, maybe there should be a bonding tab on the crimp to allow for potential bonding.
Indeed.
Again, does this rely on the effectiveness of the plumber's installation method to actually verify that continuity isn't achieved? We need to do a bit more work on that, really.
James said we need more coordination between trades for bonding and earthing. Completely agree. Sam Cook, have had an issue with something similar on a larger scale where the external sheath became damaged on the incoming, yet to be confirmed the outcome by the manufacturer. It's fascinating. These are journeys of discovery we're all going on. We assume that a plastic pipe, you see, it is. But when you then look at an image, you go, actually, if that's being pneumatically crimped, there will be some sort of strength there, something to reinforce that pipe. Is there a potential that a conductive sleeve could bring power or voltage in, as defined as extraneous? Yes.
Again, as you said, you've tried to contact the manufacturer to find the insulation tolerance.
Yeah.
Of this material, and if we don't know, it could be that it's fine for nominal voltage, but it might not be fine for transients.
Yeah, I mean, you could end up with ghost ZEs, couldn't you? And you could also end up with mystery diverted neutral currents going, well, all my services are insulated. Where's it coming from? Well, it's actually on the sheath of your water pipe that's plastic.
Yeah. Yeah, so
yeah.
It's another journey of discovery, and this is something that probably won't actually have any impact on Amendment 2, but it's something that we will keep an eye on.
Hey, listen, this is the first time we're talking about it here anyway, to be honest with you. We're not mentioning this on anything, so...
Yeah, but that's the point. We update these in real time, don't we, these presentations?
We
do indeed. All right, AFDDs. So we did a big journey of discovery with the AFDD when we looked at it back then, and we were educated, and 62606 wasn't that updated? That was updated, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's been amended since it came out. Yeah,
since it's been out, and we've done some learning. And where are we at with these devices now?
Do you know what? I think they're a good device. I think they are coming down in cost. They are cost prohibitive. I think the one thing that we've said is they should be selected and erected in proportion to the nature of the load.
Yeah.
At the moment, the current regulations say premises of sleeping accommodation. Everybody rows over that. Applications of risk of fire, nature of materials, fine, but it also should be load. You know, most people now will acknowledge that if you have a domestic lighting circuit, there is no advantageous need for it on a 60-watt lighting circuit, but a electric cooker, an electric shower, very much so. You know?
I've seen a few posts now on Instagram and other places, electricians, and they really are starting to kind of break down the number of AFDDs. It was first of all just all AFDDs, but now there's somewhere there are a couple of non-AFDDs, and there are some that are, and you can see they're being a bit more sensible in their selection. Which helps because it helps you use them. It's better to use them to bring the cost down in the long term, but only if necessary. Now, Electrium in particular bring them down to 1.5 amp, don't they? So that's Wilex and do Crabtree do AFDDs? Don't know.
Yeah, they do them in all variations.
All of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything that's Electrium, you can pretty much get in.
Now, the requirement of 62606 was 2.5 amp. Electrium brought it down to 1.5 amp. Now, lighting circuits aren't typically going to go over that anyway, 1.5 amp. So
they're not the pollution category 3 or above. So
domestic
heavy commercial and industrial, they're not very much useful. And there's no free-phase version of them yet.
No. So
interesting.
Yeah, we are expanding our understanding of these devices. And I think we're okay now with them. And I think the changes. Let's just go to this potential change here. Actually, here's a couple of slides.
Series and parallel arcs. That's basically what they look for.
Series arc. We're seeing a number of examples of series arcs that AFDDs would have helped with being shown on social media now. And I mean, this is the key culprit, isn't it? The white goods, really.
Yeah.
And this new method of protection, the AFDD. Okay, we have done videos on AFDDs. Our first early videos of AFDDs, we weren't very pleased with the outcome. We then went on a learning journey, and we were then critical of them pending some changes. 62606 was amended, and we got to understand some more parts of them. I think we just got more honesty from the manufacturers as we went through.
Well, the manufacturers, I think, adopted the philosophy of buy our product, it's amazing.
Yes.
But there are too many electricians out there now who will trust, but they need to verify.
Trust but verify.
And we needed to understand, because it's not the manufacturer standing in the person's home, it's you. And if that person happens to be reasonably intelligent, you should be able to say, well, actually, this little device is a computer that analyzes that waveform, and it's able to tell a good arc from a bad arc when there's some sort of fault or loose connection. That will save your house from catching fire.
And I think that was my frustration. My biggest frustration really was that we weren't, electricians weren't being given enough information to then speak to the client. What we were being told is they stop fires. Which
is brilliant.
Which is great. But every other installation prior to AFDDs should, in theory, have had the same outcome.
Remember, RCDs were supposed to be supplementary protection from fire as well.
So, right, the proposed changes then. It's not bad.
Needs to kick off on. It's a shall. I get it, but this technology is. I think it needs to be established, and the cost needs to come down. It shouldn't have to cost you over £1,000 for a board if you are packing out a board. But ARC faults shall be provided for single-phase AC circuits.
But we knew this was coming. because
Yes.
we knew of the push in Europe. Do you think that if we keep the shall, that will then obviously force the hand, and these will then be more affordable, quicker, and industry quicker? Do you think we'll just get over this hump of having a period? I mean,
I don't know, because
the attitude years ago was quite bad. The manufacturers were just saying, "Sod it, they'll have to pay for it."
I think the sting in the tail for a lot of blokes is you can go into a wholesaler and you'll buy, say, a 10-way RCBO Type A board, and it will cost you 500 quid one week. Go there another week, and it'll be 300 quid.
Yeah.
And that does leave a bad taste in the mouth. The hardest thing is, I think a lot of electricians would definitely recommend these. And I think there would be no doubt to them seeing this as the next level of protection for the cabling. But there is the negative alternative, because if you're doing a board change and you're selecting AFDD, are you going to get loads of callbacks from all the white goods kicking in? Probably. This is exactly what happened in Germany and Austria.
Yeah.
When we went to see the guys in Germany and Austria, they said they had so many ripped out and sent back to the manufacturers. There was nothing wrong with the devices. It was the mindset of the people. They didn't want their devices detecting cheap rubbish plugged in and tripping out.
Well, I remember when I was on the tools in a local authority, we'd put in RCDs back in the 16th edition when we had to have socket outlets with RCDs. We go in, we put the device in, then suddenly the refrigerator or the washing machine isn't suitable anymore. That device that they've had for 10 years or so is all of a sudden not suitable because it's tripping the RCD. And this might happen a lot with AFDDs. We may have that the actual device being introduced will raise awareness of maybe undiscovered faults amongst their equipment.
I'm a big fan of this. To me, is the definition of a regulation, like with RCDs, that needs a engineering judgment, good selection and erection. Mark Holmes has put most new jobs I do are split down into a lot of smaller circuits onto RCBOs, which is great. With the price of AFDDs, we'll be going back to bigger circuits with additional load and throw the 30 milliamp leakage out the window. I think the 30 milliamp leakage one, which we'll go on to, it's a very difficult one at the moment because there's not enough info out there. But we'll come on to it a bit later.
We'll come on to that, but it's a good point. I mean, what we're going to try to do is try to put larger circuits together for fewer AFDDs, which will then mean larger collective amounts of protective conductor currents, which is basically, that's not going to be achievable either. Kevin has said in the questions here, can the program or the computer be updated yet inside the AFDD to detect different future arcing events or future devices? As far as I'm concerned, no. You aware of any way to get these updated?
No, you can't update them.
No, pretty much. Now, we did say that in our previous videos on this, when the board gets to that point of being connected to the internet, and, we're not far away from that.
It's coming.
It's coming very, very soon. This really is, I think I said this in the previous video, this is like the first generation of this technology. The next generation or the third generation will always be connected to the internet and will feed back information and will be updated as new devices. Because they're designed to look within a threshold, but different manufacturers will do things differently. It's like hair straighteners and things. Hair straighteners work in one way, but then you've got companies that manufacture these flexible plates that then use the electronics in a completely different way. Manufacturers will always push the boundary, and the device will just become a static point in time. And the device may then become redundant. We might find ourselves replacing these or newer models.
From a comment perspective, I would go online and I would say I would suggest this stays a recommendation for the time being. So I would take shall and I would just be recommended. I would also get rid of that junk that they've put I1 and 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6.
I tell you what this is, right? This is lazy. What they've done is they've looked at the protection against overcurrent and fault current and the two requirements where we don't want them due to the risk. There are two regulations with the emission of protection against overload and fault current. And it's these. These are exactly quoted from 434 and 433. And they've added light circuits at the bottom.
So I would actually reinstate. So if I was commenting on this, I would suggest that you say, maybe my recommendation would be premises would be maybe dwellings. Change it from premises to dwellings. Locations with risk of fire, I would definitely put back in there. Locations with combustible constructional materials, depends. Fire propagating structures, yes. Locations with endangering of implaceable goods, yes. Lighting circuits in dwellings, yes. Medical IT equipment, yes. But the rest of it, get rid of. Oh, and the fire alarm as well.
You see, location risk of fire and combustible materials, those environments are surely going to be pollution category 3 or so. Yeah. So these devices might not be suitable for those anyway.
And Tony Albany has said, please forgive me if the name is wrong. He says, just scares me. It's hard enough in the domestic market as it is. It's all manufacturers do this differently. Shouldn't they be uniformed? The principle, the intent of the standard 62606 is uniform.
Yeah.
But it's like going out to a wholesaler and saying, can I have a MCB? And getting a double width one and going, what's this? It's technically a 60898 MCB. It's just a different way of doing it.
Fundamentally, they have to get an outcome. The outcome has to be the same, but how they get there,
it's down to them.
Is down to them.
But this is why we've said electricians will end up picking the manufacturers they want and using them as their go-to brand. Now, next year we know, because Schneider announced it at their industry conference, next year Schneider are going to release a double pole breaker, which is an MCB, an RCD, an AFDD, and the power tag technology, correct me if I'm wrong here, built in, where the video they show has a guy with an app on his phone, and it messages him saying, dangerous arc detected, breaker tripped.
Yes.
That's going to be one of the new offerings next year. That's incredible.
And that, to me, again, is already the next generation of protected devices from the AFDD. Connecting it to the the Internet of Things, connecting the distribution and the power requirement to the client. I mean, clients already now want to speak to their heating program, their lighting controls on their devices. So if something's going to trip or it's going to overload, they want to also have that notification on their phone or that information. They won't give a damn. And if you tell them, if you remotely say to them, press your test button, they might actually bother if that gets told to them remotely on their phone.
Yeah.
And if you had software that said that, then you're getting rid of that labeling requirement, because the software will say, right, you're due a test. And if you keep popping this notification up and you can't remove it until it's obviously been told to the app that it's been tested, then you've got a winner there. And maybe Schneider can add that. If you're watching Schneider, add that, and there you go. Yeah. But this is the point. Yeah, they'll speak to all the appliances, and the appliances speak to them, and that's where we're at now. Eddie, they want to speak to the fridge. Everything wants to speak to the fridge, Eddie. Everything. Yeah. Washing machine.
Cook has made an interesting comment. Looks after a school which houses 10 plus boarding houses subjected to requirements of installing AFDDs. Okay. The school employ 4 electricians on site who maintain it. Great. Which would adequate risk assessments require the neglection of these, as they are continually under supervision daily. However, on the 75 private houses they rent to staff, they want to replace distribution boards which are no older than 5 years old. In terms of distribution equipment, well, I would say straight away, my client hat on is where's the value add for me? Have they done a periodic, and are they? Is this an insurance-based issue? Because 5 years old, why would you want to upgrade unless you can determine a value add in terms of safety? Yes, they will, but really, 5 years old?
Yeah, it's true.
I would risk assess. I would personally, if I was the engineer responsible, I would do a risk assessment, and I would then put a plan in place at say 25 years to then replace with whatever the latest FDD is.
Yeah, Richard says, how would you be able to reset the device if using it on the phone? Well, the alert to tell you would go on the phone, and then
you can't reset it on the phone.
And when you reset the device will then tell the software it's been done, it's been tested, and then the notification will go. There are devices that do work remotely.
He would be saying no, because the minute you start having software taking control of stuff, you would then go under safety integrity levels and various other directives of the EU. Getting the notification, having one-way traffic is probably as where we want to stop. I know there are devices where you can get them where they commercially reset, and I bet you if you asked for their SIL certificate and their ratings, they would probably question what you're talking about. So let's not go down that road.
So I think I'm with you in that I think this shall requirement is too soon.
Yep.
I don't like this whole list here.
No, the list needs to be amended, and the shall needs to be recommended.
It's gumped. So just reading this, it basically says all AC final circuits.
Oh no.
Yeah, shall provide for all AC final circuits for sockets and fixed equipment up to 32 amp. Okay. And that's it. Lighting circuit's been accepted. You're saying, oh no, what's that?
James Green's made a comment. BSEN 62606 seems to be due for another amendment. DPC due in mid-February. Due for publication February 22. They're evidently updating it.
Great. And so we're about to say yes. Let's have this child requirement for a device that's actually about to be amended to the standard. Great.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. No. Let's move on.
Definitely too early for shall. If it's
without doubt.
Well done, James. Yeah, definitely too early for that. So that's our comment. I'd actually add that. I'll probably say pending that amendment. I'd add that into my comment on that. Right, moving on. We've got addition to 422.1. So 422.1, because where risk of fire exists. We've got this introduction of the need to consider the fire safety design of a building. Yeah. Documentation of this. Fire safety manual produced by or for the person responsible for the building, as detailed in the local national fire safety legislation, including, for example, BS 79999. So what's the regulations actually asking us here?
This is more about the duty of care for cooperation and coordination. So the current regulation is a bit, it's only 2 lines, which are in white. That has all been added, because what they're evidently doing is, even though at the very start of it, 110, I think it talks about other regulations we need to be mindful of, 5839, 5266. This is now just reminding us anything to do with fire safety. This is a Grenfell output, evidently, preempting it, is where the fire safety design building is documented. We should speak to the person responsible so that we can understand it, because the last thing you want to do is poke a load of conduits or plastic trunkings into area where you're completely breaching fire compartmentation and you may not have known. So this is can you, Mr. Electrical Installer, when you're updating your knowledge, please be mindful of fire safety for the building, and that will include the alarms, compartmentation, and obviously premature collapse. So, regardless of all the arguments people had when the 18th edition came out and Amendment 3 of the 17th, fire safety is becoming more paramount.
Obviously, yeah, with Grenfell.
I don't disagree with this. Actually, I think it's a good level of information, although I'd like to see it in more plainer English, especially when it talks about
to me,
flame propagation and all that malarkey.
Yeah, I mean, to me, having those standards within the scope in 110 would have meant that this is already in the regulations, but now it's been just expressed more that it's needed.
Yeah.
You know,
and again, that's where the AFDD comes in, because the guys are saying like showers, absolutely. And for me, if I'm selecting an AFDD, it's very simple: is it above the 1.5 or 2.5 amps the manufacturers say? How long am I using the product for? Do I have to control the installation? For me, I don't possibly need them, but any other home, yes, showers, large current boilers, cookers, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I know they're not going in appliances because they write the regs, so.
Yeah, indeed. All right, so you've got this next slide here just showing these here, Paul.
Yeah, this is just a visual to link the fact that most people believe that the 5839 and all these others don't link to them. But if you look at the top there, that's Regulation 560 from the Blue Book. Fire detection and alarm systems shall comply with 5839. You then go into 5839, which is the British Standard for Fire Alarms, Part 1. And it says in the installation practices, workmanship need to conform to 7671. It's a circle of cross-referencing. And we are going to cover that next week.
Tuesday.
On our fire webinar.
Yes.
We'll be coding fire systems, so please tune in for that. Last one of the year.
Yeah. We're going to see the year out with that one. So, the protected escape routes.
Yeah, this is just kind of a rewording, really, to be honest with you, of everything that was there, because they had conditions BD2, BD3, and it was a bit all over the place.
Yeah, the BD2, BD3 is kind of leaving, and they're going more with this other idea here.
But it's a very, very good regulation, because I think we've discussed this on the podcast as well. Cables and other equipment shall not be installed in protected escape route unless they're part of an essential fire safety system. Now, there's 2 notes. Generally, this means cables in protected escape routes should be limited to lighting, emergency lighting, fire detection, which, in all fairness, emergency lighting and fire detection can be a fire-resistant cable, and alarms, although cables for other safety systems may be necessary. Hospitals may have special guidance, but only cables that meet the following requirements shall be installed. And it talks about flame propagation, or where cable management systems meet the requirements of that as well. So that, to me, is interpreted as no more mini trunking. in specific areas.
Yes, and I mean, some of this information was already in Part 5 for selection of the wiring systems in locations where there's a risk of fire, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of this information has come here from there. I guess that helps. I think getting rid of the BD2, BD3 part is a little bit, makes it easier to understand pushing these in. And the other half of this is here.
Eddie wants to know what he codes when it comes to 5839. Stay tuned for Tuesday's webinar or 56010.
So you're either ready just put a limitation on the regulation 56010, or you then go into 5839 and actually ensure compliance with 5839.
Yep,
basically. So
it's going to be interesting because all the mini trunking that's around many social housing premise, breaching fire compartmentations for evacuation routes and stuff. I look forward to the day where all that stuff is ripped out, because years ago it used to be proper conduit jobs, pyros, all fire resistant stuff anyway. So back to the good old days. Well, I can see this driving in a good way some more short courses that help people brush up on their industrial skills, conduit bending, metal munching, the stuff that people don't use because of cost. Because I think fire safety increases are naturally going to increase cost, and I think a lot of clients are not going to have a choice but to pay for it, especially with the output of the recommendations of Grenfell, because if they have a competent contractor tell them, they can't tell the contractor to change their recommendation. That's a competent contractor telling them.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that they've discovered with this is, again, I keep going back to the old clerk of the work strategy, where we'd have that one central person that would then coordinate compliance amongst different trades, different responsibilities, to make sure that we have that assurance that nothing compromises anything else. Pushing stuff this way is trying to go back that way and getting rid of the crap work, hopefully. Okay, 443.4 over voltage control. Is this the old rig?
Yeah.
Looks like it. Yeah. So this is the old regulation here.
Yep.
There's been, and by the way, let me just get ahead. Actually, I'll do that in a minute. There's been a number of comments on this one already, which is very interesting. People don't like this risk assessment method, and they want it simplified. A lot of people are saying, let's just get them put in domestics as standard. And I think unless there's a safety reason, I mean, we discussed this with Kirsty, etc.
We did. We basically agreed that the risk assessment, if you were doing it, you were kind of missing the point, because the risk assessment was limited to, I think it was only of atmospheric origin. That was the only time you use the risk assessment, whereas atmospheric, you still got to protect against transients that are coming off of the mains and from switching surges. So
it does seem disconnected to actually trying to do the risk assessment. It just seems like they should pull it out. There's lots of comments currently from the ECA and similar about the idea of just getting rid of all of this risk assessment and relying on 62305, and that we should go straight to 62305 for this.
Well, we've always said that the standards are going to cross more. There's going to be overlay. You can't just use 7671 anymore with the technologies that we have. But I did see something from the ECA online the other day that said, I think it was their interpretation was there would be less need for surge protection devices, if I remember rightly, which I thought,
Yeah, I couldn't quite see where they came with that outcome.
I just thought, you know what, for what it is and what it does, yeah.
One of the comments currently here is saying these SBDs top brand can cost £30 in domestic. So I mean, yes, I mean the regulation even says. I mean, I'm trying to read this. Except for single dwelling units, this is still quite frustrating. This value here,
Sam Cooks still installs pyro and trunking. God bless you, sir. Please keep it up. It's something that's been dying on its arse for 20 years. So
go on Instagram and give us loads of pictures and stuff to then share with people.
Richard Harrison saying we can't wire general circuits in a corridor. Well, you could, but they would have to then consider the fire properties of the building, and they would probably have to be a fire rated. If you're running armoured or saying FP400s, it'd be very expensive. But basically, keep the rubbish out of the areas where you don't need them, is what it's saying.
Basically, yeah. Okay, so the rewording is overvoltage protection should be provided where consequence caused by the overvoltage could cause serious injury to a loss of human life. That's understandable. Significant financial or data loss. Okay, and then we have the notes there. Nothing really important with that. But except for the single dwelling units, for all other cases where the consequence of the overvoltage of the atmospheric origin are considered to be intolerable, the risk assessment shall be performed in order to determine if protection is required. So yeah, this has been questioned a lot on the comments, and I kind of agree. I'm going to add a comment on this one. I think that this is unnecessary for what we're talking about, emitting a device that achieves protection against an overvoltage.
I think, Dave, it's just written poorly, to be honest with you. In the existing and in the new, it's written poorly.
We're assessing risk to not install a protective device. To me, that's just bonkers. You know, that just feels weird.
I don't think any electrician would, knowingly, if they know something is a genuine benefit and enhances the safety of the installation, they wouldn't install it. The balance is where you install a new protective device in the existing installation, and the loads then could cause tripping nuisances, which could damage your reputation, even though it's actually their kit that's wrong.
Again, that stuff that trips over voltage devices hopefully should be passive. Although you have had some that have regularly operated and then they were just removed. You know, so there are ongoing issues, but that should flag some other issues, shouldn't it?
Indeed. Steve Dobson says should go back to proper install, steel conduit, etc. Yeah, I don't disagree with you there, sir. Mark Holmes, who deems it a protected escape route? Sorry, I'm going back a bit here.
Yep.
Victorian house made into flats. Will a fire risk assessor have to be called in? Yes, a fire risk assessor, if you ask them, will give you the adequate guidance. There are DFT documents available that will give you more guidance, but you need to very specifically spell out to them because they will ask you for the fire strategy for the building and all of the various fire engineering that's been done. If it hasn't, then it's part B of the building rank you start at and then go to BS by 9999, but get an expert in.
Yeah, I mean, it is to find the protected escape route, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let me just find it.
If the client states their installation is tolerable, from Mr. Harrison, then we do not need to do the risk assessment. Say a commercial installation when the client states they determine their loss is tolerable and we have quoted to fit SPDs. If they're willing to put that in writing and they understand the duty of care that you've discharged under the regulations, then fine. If they just say, no, I don't want it, and you haven't told them why, then there could be a comeback on you. So
I guess that is the key, is how well you inform the client so the client has information to make a decision against.
Yeah.
How and you've got to decide how you can deliver that. Yeah, so the protected escape route, a route enclosed within a specified fire-resisting construction designated for escape to a place of safety in the event of an emergency. So any fire-contained structure, part of that corridor passage that's contained would take action as a fire escape for people who are in that space. No, way I see it. How do you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good.
So, but again, I mean, go back to the Shelley Towers example with the wiring systems that fell in the communal flats. This, again, should stop that happening. If we put in non-flame propagating wiring systems or we put in higher integrity wiring systems, then there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, and there is more info on the, as James has pointed out, on Appendix 13. On a protected escape route. Expect this to just gravitate more and more and more. So if there is going to be an Amendment 3, expect more on fire safety. 19th edition, again, more on fire safety. There's going to be a lot of synergy.
I think we've had obviously 10, 15 years of, the MT2, sticky back trunking, that kind of contracts being issued in that way. And the regulations haven't been written in a way that stops that work. And that's what's happening now, is the regulations are being adjusted to compromise anyone being able to design that way now. And so if you were to go to a block of flats that had old MI in the concrete that's broken down and needs a rewire, you can't now just go in and whack some sticky trunking up. We've got to obviously look at the regulations, how they're written now, and they're being written now to kind of fix how they've been written before.
Richard, if Richard's saying about back on Warrenvin corridor, it's only possible to go through the corridor to other rooms. Basically, the cable needs to be metal conduit. Pretty much, although you would get asked why is it going through there. Unless it absolutely has to, you have to take additional measures, which would be metal conduit, premature collapse.
Well, this goes back to that 42 regulation 9999, where we look at obviously who is in charge of fire compartmentation in the structure, and we're going to make sure we have told them that we require breaking a build a fabric, that we've followed all of their processes to obviously reinstate it with equal or improved degree, or they may even have a third party do that. We may break it, they may then seal it, but we obviously can't just go making holes and assume that there's no other compromise.
And don't be surprised if when you ask for, say, fire compartmentation registers, you get a blank face. Some contractors may see it as an opportunity to employ a fire guy who can actually develop these for them, and they offer it as a service.
Didn't Dan do some training on that, didn't he?
Dan did some stuff on it,
Yeah, because he had to look into
Keep your hands off of him.
But yeah, that's the point. It's if we break a building fabric, we've got to make sure, and that's in 537 or 539. About proximity of the wiring systems and stuff. It's in there as well. 710 mil square if we have internal space in our wiring system passing through. It's already in there, but this is coming to protection as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move forward. This was the end of this one about the notes. So this is indirect lightning strokes. I noticed a comment. There was a comment on this saying, they've used the wrong word. They've done strokes instead of strikes. Someone says this should be lightning strikes. We're talking here about strokes.
Yeah. The after effect.
This is written well. I'm going to comment and disagree with the risk assessment part still. Move on to part 5. The period inspection testing label. So this is what we've had, this need for this label to be installed with the wording. And then what we've got is the potential here not to be applied for domestic if the fixing of the notice is not really practicable. For example, if there's insufficient room or the location of the notice is deemed unlikely to be beneficial, or an installation certificate complete with guidance and instruction for recipients as detailed in Appendix 6 has been issued to the person ordering the work. Now, I can see the point of this. There are manufacturers, like Schneider, is it the Easy 9? Their panels, they have custom lids and stuff for the boards to be aesthetically pleasing. Homeowners know where their board is. Could this information be given in a manual? Or could the information be given in another way than a label on the board?
I'm very surprised at all the labeling companies that are on Instagram and stuff. They don't create one A4 sheet that you can put in, say, a frame, a click frame that you put next to the board, and it has everything integrated. It's like I'd love to see one designed, but it basically has all the warnings, all the duty of care, all the instructions to operate the electrical installation, including the scheduler circuit details, in a nice little click frame next to the board. That would look pretty cool. But there is more information in Appendix 11.
Yes,
it does appear that basically the level of labeling, because there's more labeling requirements,
more labels.
It's now about what's reasonably practicable.
And a lot of the comments already made are basically suggesting that this is going to mean there's going to be less maintenance carried out, and if we take the label away, that the clients and the homeowners are going to be less informed.
Eddie Clements,
do you think the label has that much impact?
I have a labeling OCD, and I'm writing a standard just around labeling, because labeling, if you put, my view on it has always been, if you go to an installation and the labeling is very clear and unambiguous and gives you the right information, regardless of whether you have drawings or not, then someone's done a really good job around the installation, and it's fairly likely that my assessment will be the install will be just as good. That's on commercial industrial installations. Domestic, it can be an absolute hodgepodge, to be honest with you, because some labels are 30 years old, where the guy who did it was a brilliant spark. It's been chopped and butchered by someone else, so we're not very good at removing them. But Eddie said manuals don't get passed in commercial industrial, never happen domestic. You see my last house, that was an O&M that was pretty epic. And I actually do have, in my former house, I left next to the board just a plastic file thing with laminated schedules and everything in.
Yeah. So
but that's me being sad.
So this is saying that the EICR label.
Yeah.
Other labels obviously aren't omitted from that. So do we think that that is the one label that we could omit or that should be omitted? And do you think that would result in less regular maintenance?
In fairness, in this DPC, it's not just this label, because we could have spent an hour talking about labeling. So we just left that one as an example. There are other, this pretty much is referred to across multiple labeling. The need for surge, it's the exact same for surge as well. Periodic inspection, it's the exact same for that. So it's worthwhile, if you're interested in labeling, you have a vested interest, what your thoughts are. I personally think maybe we take it high level and just say the installation must have suitable and sufficient warning labels, notices, which must be updated on any alterations, additions by the said contractor. It should be in a format of font, clear, unambiguous, dated. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be stuck to the board. It can be near it. I think that might be better, and allow the contractor to update the labeling stuff. Just a view, don't shoot.
I'm just looking now, actually.
Yeah, would we be handing an O&M manual?
It doesn't mention it. It doesn't mention it with 5149. Which
your certificate does form part technically of any O&M manual anyway.
Yeah.
Eddie has said SPD should have a contact and audible alarm. I totally agree with you. Sam Cook, my worry would be the skill set and ongoing teaching electricians coming through. I was lucky I was mentored within a family company which didn't install twin enough till 1967. Wow. In site sheds for Egham airfield temporaries, my concern, mainly housing associations, to employ a maintenance company who can send a chippy to make a broken socket one day and a plumber to fix. Yeah, this multi-skilled thing that's come out now where you can do a multi-skilled NVQ is a worry to trades. Would love to get back to older practices, but would require a large amount of destruction to clients' expectations. Would also like to see charge hands coming around checking up on works which are being done. I really like Sam Cook, can I just say now, because Sam, you need to come and work on my railway, because I am old school and I'm going back to the good old days. IP washers, everything, clerk of works, the lot.
Yeah, and your mushroom head screws and all that.
Oh yeah. None of that count as something.
Pan edge screw. Yeah, no, you're right. It's this emission is on the RCD one, the EICR one, and the two colours. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I think dual colours can die a death. To be honest with you, it's been long enough.
Yeah, I think that can. That's from 2004 time-ish, I think, around there. But I think it does create a bit of confusion. I'm going to put a comment on that.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm going to comment on that as well. Actually,
I'm in favour of the idea of us having a manual. With the warning, but we need to obviously kind of push that across so that customers receive it and understand the blooming thing. Right, okay, let's move forward. RCD types.
The existing reg.
Yeah, so this is the existing one where we have the consideration of unwanted tripping, division of installation 314, the 30%. Okay, time delayed, which isn't going to help if you need the RCD for additional protection, coordination, or SPDs. And then they've squeezed in this one here, which is more RCBOs for individual final circuits and domestic installations. See also 314, which is division of installation. So the idea here is to help unwanted tripping is to get rid of the 70th edition split board and go with a new idea of a RCBO throughout. A couple of interesting comments I saw were saying that the designer already has this freedom for division of installation, and this isn't necessary because the designer has that choice that they can make in 314, and they don't need this regulation to be here for them to actually have that. And this is a consideration. So what do you think? Do you think that this is,
well, okay, so no. The designer does, a lot of the times the designer doesn't have that consideration because the designer's trying to win the job. If you go into the domestic world, the designer is the installation electrician.
So do you think having that addition there, which is a consideration, would actually then give the designer more?
Yes, that is more weight to the eventual removal of split load boards. Mm-hmm. In my personal opinion, that to me is a good thing. I think that's a very good line. And to be honest with you, it's slightly embarrassing it's in there because if you look at part 1 and part 3, you kind of should be able to work that out to a certain extent or make a reasonable judgment.
I think that's the point. I think that 1 and 3 combined result in this as the answer.
But actually, no, do you know what? I'm going to take that back because the reason blokes can't or electricians can't, is because we don't have enough information on leakage currents in the regs. As I've said before, there needs to be more information on leakage currents from the available standards of products, so electricians can make more informed. I mean, there's the, was it IEC Technical Report 62350, which talks about RCD configuration selectivity, how we do that, but also this 30% rule. How do we define and figure out the leakage of these products? But there is standards for them. Schneider are actually probably the best list of leakage you can get at the moment, and we haven't got £20,000 to pay out for
at the
all
moment,
the rest of the standards. But it should be an appendix.
That's a pretty good list.
It's a great list.
But again, for the electrician that's going to install a circuit, they now need to know the types of equipment that's going to be done. Or do we have, a bit like diversity, an assumption that there will be a washing machine, a tumble, and, you know, if we were to put something in before someone moves in or before we actually provide it for a tenant, we make some assumptions on equipment types and leakage types to then break it down. It's not quite conclusive with these requirements. All we're going to do here with Amendment 2, though, is say, right, does the recommendation of more RCBOs help? I think the designers have this freedom already, but it doesn't do any harm.
My comment on that, Dave, if you don't mind me saying, would be the current regulation, it says this: you've now proposed the use of RCBOs for individual circuits. Mm-hmm. I would suggest that they reword it to say the use of RCBOs for individual final circuits in domestic installations. See also section 314 and appendix, I don't know, 18.
It's a bit strange. Why
put more information on it?
We've got here subdivision of circuits with individual associated RCDs. So why do we need the warrant of the domestic being RCBOs?
This is phasing out slowly. We heard on I think it was an NIC talk the other day that they mentioned that manufacturers have pretty much stopped making AC type RCDs for the UK, which means they've got thousands of them sat on shelves. Mm-hmm. So this is about phasing out products. And then some poor Joe comes along and says, oh, it's A type AC against the current regs, recommend a replacement there. It's more economic than it is.
Maybe this is also to get rid of a shit pile of AC RCBOs that they've got.
Exactly what it may be for.
All right, let me see. Is any comments on this? Sean says it's almost impossible to design many installations to factor in earth leakage of connected equipment. It kind of looks like we need some kind of guidance or some kind of template for an installation that we're not going to know the specifics. And again, the specifics are great, but look all about the life of the installation. If a client says my washing machine is this or my whatever is this, and I can find out that equipment has X amount of leakage current, well, the standards, the 62350 standards might say, oh, that can go up to 5 milliamp. You know, so if I go, well, it's only a 2.5 milliamp, if they can then replace that next year for one that's at 5 milliamp and is still within its product standard, my design may not like that. So do we now just go with the assumptions of worst cases to those requirements and not the specifics of what they have in the home? You know?
So just for everyone listening, if you want to understand more about the actual product standards, there's a suite of standards called IEC 60335, and then it starts at -2 and it will go from 1 up to, well, over 100 odd.
Yeah, I mean,
so each product has its own.
The best thing you can do for now with this is if you Google Schneider guide to, is it earthing systems or RCDs? It's the RCD guide.
It's the RCD guide, yeah.
The 2020 RCD guide Schneider.
Yeah.
You find a little picture of a woman and something. And in there you go through all the different types of RCDs, and there's a table that gives a very good list. There's a good 20 or so equipment types on there. And it gives you an understanding of where this is going.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's our conclusion with this one, Paul? Are you going to comment on that?
I personally would make a recommendation. I'm just trying to find the reference to the actual standard that deals with this leakage and subdivision installation. It's buried on our Instagram page. It's quite handy, but it's a nightmare trying to find stuff at times.
Aaron's
yeah, there is. I would ask them to put a new appendice. I'd recommend a new appendices that gives more information on earth leakage. I think it's inevitable it will come, but when, I don't know.
Yeah. Aaron's put a link in the chat. I think I'm going to assume that that's it. It's a Schneider link. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So the types of RCD, we went on a journey. Well, you went on a journey many years ago. I've been on a journey with 7909 about the problems of ACR CDs, and we've seen the proposal in this amendment that ACR CDs, the line that has general purpose only type AC may be used, or AC may be used for general, has now been reworded to A. We knew that was going to happen. It's frustrating that it happened this late, because this isn't coming in for 2 years or so. That's fine. We knew that. What about this? This type ACRC shall only be used to serve fixed equipment if it's known that the load contains no DC components.
It's a def nail of RCDs, type AC.
There's going to be a point.
Notice.
Yeah, there's going to be a point where you won't be able to buy an ACR CD.
Yeah. Well, the fact of the matter is this. It's a bit of a cop-out, to be honest with you, because if you're having your NIC area engineer or NAPIT engineer come around and do an inspection and you fitted a split-load ACR board, he'll just sit there and go, well, what about 53133? There's a component there. It produces DC. There's quite a high level of leakage coming out of it. Why have you fitted AC type? And then what do? They just sit there and go, I didn't know. I personally think they should just say, for general purposes, only type A may be used or shall be used. Mm-hmm. Type AC, I would rather them just rewrite type AC should not be used going forward.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. They don't have any future. They're not future-proof, so they're not suitable for a live.
They won't change it, but I would still put that narrative in, to be honest with you, because it's clear and unambiguous then.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. Let's move forward from that one. All right, I've added this one because we've had discussions about the 7288 RCD sockets.
I'll get my coat.
All right. Now, we mentioned earlier on that some comments may be made on regulations that aren't proposed to change, and we've discussed about 7288 RCDs, and we've had some people come in and say, yes, but the wording of the standard 72288 is wrong. Do some research, do a little reading up on this, and you'll find that, yes, there is an issue with the way it's written in 7288, which means it doesn't appear in 7671. They have made comments on the fact that it's supposed to be in 7671, but it can't be with the way it's written. The ECA on the site right now have made comments to say that this should come in, and that they see that 7288 SRCDs are fine. So if you feel that that's the case, then add that comment. If you think that 7288 SRCDs should be in here. I'm not going to make that comment until 7288 is rewritten. Yeah. To me, 7288 would need to be rewritten before that comes in.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Let me just actually see what one of the comments is written here. The comment says, there's only actually 4 comments, to be honest, with this, and I think it's the ECA plus a couple. You can tell when the comments are ECA because they put ECA in them. Yeah, so they're pretty much, they're saying that the way it's written needs to change. Actually, let me just blow this up.
Need banning, according to Martin Thomas. So they've sold millions of them. That's the bad thing.
So this is the ECA comment. There's no reference to BS7288 sockets and fuse connection units incorporating RCDs. ECA is aware that there are some disparities in the wording in BS7288. However, ECA feel that this should be corrected, and the electrical installers should have confidence to install these products, knowing that they offer suitable additional protection. The way 7288 is written, they do not offer suitable additional protection. So the ECA is saying it's written badly and that we should ignore the way it's written in 7288. That creates a dangerous area for me. If I'm obviously then going to have a 7288 standard introduced in 7671, and if I go to that standard, it says something that disagrees with 7671.
The biggest problem for me is I think this comes down to purely 7288 hasn't been updated. When you start looking at the volume of standards, there's no real synergy, because when one gets updated, the other one may take 4 or 5 years to get updated, only if they realise. But when you start researching it, you do find massive gaps across standards and contradictions in terms.
But the question here then is it okay for us to just assume something of a standard? that's what the ECA are doing here. They're saying, there are disparities and it's not written properly, so let's just throw it into the 7671
I think what that sounds like to me is the ECA are doing a
service.
Piece of engineer. Well, no, more of a piece of engineering judgment based on the fact that if that socket outlet provides a Type A form of RCD protection, it is suitable for that. It may not provide the adequate isolation and segregation via the contacts in accordance with current standards, but it still affords a level of additional or supplementary protection. So it's better to have it than not have it in some scenarios. I think that's what they're trying to say.
That's what they're trying to get to, but obviously 7288 needs to be redone. I mean, 7288 was updated, I think, 2016 time or 15 time. And maybe when they looked at it, they just didn't look at it in depth. They didn't really consider the problem they've got right now.
So I missed a controversy because I personally, I don't see a problem in fitting one of these devices if there is no RCD on the circuit and I'm replacing a damaged socket, for instance. I know that's heresy to some people, and please forgive me, but I'm just trying to weigh up the balance of cost and reasonably practicable and provision of some form of protection.
As long as you record that doesn't achieve additional protection as defined in 7671. That's all
I don't think they should be in schools or anything, though. I think if you've got schools, it should all be in the board protecting every part of the installation.
So that's interesting. So and one of the things I was going to say earlier on, and I've just remembered it. Well, biggest frustration here is this adjustment. This 7671 draft has no markers of changes or of anything new, so it's very hard to navigate the changes. So do go through every single regulation to see the changes, but this one isn't a change, but you can see comments. So go through and see what comments were made and see if they flagged something or they've pointed something out that's quite interesting. Read other comments and see what you think. Okay, and if you agree with them, then write your own to strengthen the comment. Just don't just assume that their comment covers you as well. Don't do that.
I would like to see a bit more harmonisation done on RCD devices across the board.
I think
we never had to deal with 62423 RCD, so now we're going to get certificates potentially with 62. Somebody bought a coffee maker, didn't they? And in the manufacturing instruction, it required a Type F RCD. Hello, plug that into your kitchen. Great, that's 500 quid. And a dedicated socket, that's like £1,000 just to own a coffee machine in a house.
It does seem that, you'd assume that the actual product standard that they're manufactured to would try to push some level of harmonization with the protected devices available.
Yeah.
You'd assume.
Must be good coffee. Tell me about it. Well, I don't drink it, so.
Okay. Paul, foundation earthing.
It's my favourite photo of all time. I took that donkeys ago. So foundation earthing, if anybody's listened to our new podcast today, we came up with an alternative to rods, which is on YouTube and everything else. Worth watching the YouTube one because it's got videos and explaining. But basically, this is a whole new bit of the regulations where we've known this was coming anyway from the 18th kind of draft for public comment, because that was worded differently, where they talked about having a rod, and if I can't put a rod if I'm in a flat or I'm in London, and now this is given a little bit more clarity, and we can see where it's going with prosumerism. For new premises constructed upon foundation, each building in which there is an installation using the protective measure of ADS shall be provided one of the following. And effectively, it's concrete embedded foundation earth electrode, soil embedded ring electrode, and equivalent earth electrode, such as afforded by the metalwork of a steel frame building. I would actually add to that what we saw, potentially some of the conduit discs and conduit systems, if they can provide suitable and adequate earthing. A value of resistance to earth not exceeding 20 ohms. I think 20 ohms is a little bit high, considering if you are a prosumer, you'd want that as low as practicable.
Again, we've seen with our work with earthing services that there are solutions beyond just the electrode to improve earthing electrodes.
Yeah.
So it does seem like a high number for you to be technically islanding yourself.
And I think it's fair to say that we've done like 4 hours on just UK earthing and bonding, and we've done an hour this morning. Next Wednesday is the last one, but there's lots of alternatives out there which could be of value in terms of time saving and safety of the installation. And what we've seen so far is these perform better than rods, and the solutions they've got enable us to have a better impact as far as achieving a lower impedance and a longer life for the earthing system. So, yeah, I'm gonna make just a couple of comments. Because it's fairly evident there's technology out there that this doesn't really afford. This is more traditional steel in the ground, or steel in the store, or something. I think there are alternatives. So I'm gonna make a comment that basically says, can we please have, or an equivalent, because it says an equivalent earth electrode such as that afforded by metalwork. So maybe we can say that would be other products, other technology, because I could interpret number 3 as the conjure disc.
Yeah.
Equivalent earth electrode.
Yeah.
Suitable number of 20 ohms. I wouldn't agree with. I'd like them to explain where we're getting 20 ohms from. But the rest of it, I don't really have any major issue, to be honest with you. I think the use of the discs help with the distancing of rods. And I know there's been a lot of debate on social media as well, in the chat rooms and stuff, about trying to keep 2 meters away from PMEs and stuff. I once worked with somebody who said to me, once it's in the ground, you can never segregate earth from earth. Simple. Don't even try.
Yeah.
And that has always stuck with me, to be honest with you.
Okay, a couple of questions then. Who monitors how the foundation's earthing is done? Normally the contractor,
Indeed.
Not even elected at the point of install. So this is a question. I mean, often the foundation is down and a building structure is starting to be built before the contractor's even given the job.
It's a valid point, and Eddie's comment is bang on, because it's you could end up with the if it's a developer, you could end up with the architect or the developer going to somebody, getting a generic detailing, and then getting their labourers to chuck it all in with something sticking out the ground in a bit of ducting, and then the foreman going, "There you are, Sparky, there's your earth." And you're like, "Well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Am I taking responsibility for this? How have I inspected and tested this? How have I verified it?" So it's a good question. I personally am a big fan of the electrical contractor taking ownership and control of anything that goes into the ground and the connections of. So, yeah, it's a good point. Chris has said, with conductor currents in normal operation, would electrolysis be a concern? I assume you're talking about conductor currents in the ground jumping from metalwork to metalwork.
Again, depends on your electrode type, I guess. That'd be more concern, wouldn't it?
Watch today's podcast for answers to that.
We had a lot of discussion about the potential issues of using copper electrodes, and that was in today's podcast. But you're right, and it's it's the currents in the ground we've got to really start thinking about. Most definitely. And there's got more pictures on those. Okay.
Just wrapped in.
Sorry, Eddie, I've just seen your comment now earlier on. Just basically, it was the way 7288 has a couple of parts in there that says this device provides protection against, I think it's additional protection is direct contact only, not indirect. And it also states that it must be, so it can be installed by instructed skilled persons. It doesn't achieve isolation. The isolation is achieved by the plug. Another thing, it said that the actual additional protection must be provided by the circuit upstream. It doesn't achieve additional protection totally. It needs to be provided upstream. That's basically a little snapshot of the bits that it says that questions if using the socket outlet itself achieves additional protection to 415.1, which is the problem, because there are a couple of things it says in there that questions that, and that creates the problem. And they need to fix that, really. Then it can come in here nicely. Leakage currents. Leakage currents. Now, something we've actually not mentioned, and we haven't even got a slide on that, which we should have mentioned, Paul, really, is back in part 4, the RCDs for socket outlets that could be omitted if we had the risk assessment in the non-dwelling environment has been retracted.
Yeah, good point.
So first of all, that one. Do we think that just having no ability to emit an RCD from a socket outlet is okay?
Well, it kind of makes it, for me, it's a moot point, because there are certain things I won't have an RCD on, because, again, thinking of the use of the installation, the impact to operations, the impact to revenue, you don't want necessarily RCDs tripping out where there is control over the installation. Again, I think this has been more driven towards the domestic market. I don't necessarily disagree, because if electricians can leave houses safer, great. Right. The challenges, and again, this is... I could see why they've deleted this. So this comment on the screen is about the 10 milliamp and the sizing and conductors and all that. It was deleted because we're RCDing everything. But then that introduces more consideration for the 10% rule, the 9 milliamps, and the use of RCBOs. So get rid of one, introduce another. And all we're doing is slowly going on a journey of subdivision of the installations throughout the regs. That's all we've been doing since the 17th.
Yeah. So obviously, as Paul just said, right, this regulation has been deleted because this regulation was about the need to consider if equipment has a protected conductor that exceeds 3.5 milliamp up to 10 milliamp, it would need to be permanently fixed. Okay, which means if it was on a plug, we'd have to permanently fix it. But that doesn't matter now because we have to have RCDs on those plugs because the risk assessment has been removed, and that RCD can only go up to 9 milliamp. So by default, this requirements has kind of gone. So, I mean, for you, Paul, who obviously runs all your stations and stuff, if you were to have a rewire of a station and then every single 13-amp socket outlet had to have an RCD, is that easy to work around? Could you just install different, different methods of sockets and stuff?
Lockable sockets.
Yeah.
Just put an authorization procedure in for lockable sockets, different color sockets for IT equipment only to be touched by authorized persons. Very much so. At the end of the day, you don't want computers that are generating revenue tripping out an RCD at the end of the day. There shouldn't be any need to, or the leakage current should most certainly. And we know IT equipment generates a hell of a lot of leakage.
It doesn't.
And the more you plug in, if you don't have that subdivision of installation, it can cause problems. It can cause spurious problems, and this is an issue. So yeah.
So Eddie's got an example here. Would you have an RC on a life support machine which you've got in your own house to keep you alive?
Nope.
Oh. So you wouldn't have that on a plug and socket arrangement then?
Nope.
So, okay. So the question...
Life support machine, no. I would... That'd be a dedicated circuit. I wouldn't have it on an RCD. To be honest with you, if I needed to, I'd take the RCD protection off completely. Life support machine's far more important than a sodding RCD.
Yeah. I think the question really here is we need to look at the different accessory types that are not just standard 13-amp sockets, that are selectable for dedicated equipment types. And therefore,
it's an interesting debate though Eddie raises. If you go into a pensioner's home and you're having to do modifications, and for instance they've got a dialysis machine, they've got one ring for the whole house.
My mum's got a nebulizer. She needs it 2 or 3 days a week to live, to get through her tightness of breath, and she'll have an asthma attack. And something like that, I wouldn't want tripping an RCD out.
No, you don't. Not at all.
But a lot of people would have those types of equipment at home. But so do we have to start thinking about having circuits that have other methods of utilization that don't have an RCD but are not available for all the other appliances?
No, I don't think. If you're selecting and erecting it and you know that beforehand, then yes. But you will again select and erect the installation suitable for its intended use. If it's Mrs. Jones' house and she's on a nebulizer, etc., that's an alteration addition. That's where you have to consider the use, consider the alterations, the need for protection, the need for life. At the end of the day, fundamental principles, life property. Life is more important. And if there's something that runs on energy that you don't want to trip because you don't have the relevant knowledge, you then balance the risk. And if the customer says, I'll accept that socket is non-RCD, or can you just please take the downstairs off RCD, then you follow your duty of care. You write up your risk assessment. You inform them. You say very clearly, be careful with this. Please bring me back to reinstate RCD protection. You do what's reasonably practicable. Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't really have any problems with these regulations because they can be designed around, can't they? These changes. So,
yeah.
You wouldn't comment on that?
Not really, no, to be honest with you. Yeah. The one thing, just if anyone's looking for more information, IEC 62350, it has the formula for working out leakage of a circuit, which is the sum of connected appliances times 0.75 to derate it. And if anybody wonders, just off the top of the head, you can get it in Schneider, but a PC laptop, leakage current 1 to 2 milliamps, printer 0.5 to 1, mobiles up to 0.75, and other appliances less than 3.5 milliamp. Although we know cookers and showers can be 10 milliamp.
Indeed.
For dedicated circuits.
Didn't
worth researching.
didn't we do an example of that formula in the webinar or podcast webinar that we did?
Yes, and I've got a screenshot of it on my phone, which you can't see. But it's there's an example. There's tables. It's on our Instagram.
All right. So if you want a bit more about that, we need to go to the webinar that we did, and then jump forward to this regulation, and then there's an example of that there.
There was slides. Yes.
Yeah. We're trying to keep this one short tonight because we're trying to cover the whole thing.
Well, Sean's on there, so let's keep going.
Yeah. Martin says, surely it's down to us as installers to ask the questions of the intended use of the installation. Yes,
absolutely,
100%. Again, amount of times I talk about training or design, I talk about the utilization. A lot of people don't understand, what that actually means from a perspective of, domestic or commercial or industrial. There's so much more to utilization than that. And this is an example of this. We need to understand how the client intends to use the system.
It adds to what we're saying. This is to a lot of people who were trained many years ago. This may be perceived as getting more complex, more technical. I don't think it is. I think it's just there's more synergy with standards and technology that's emerging. So it's inevitable. It's going to come across as different to us. But
I think one of the key things that's going to struggle would be books like this that try to keep things as simple as they can.
Yeah,
they try to simplify design when even in the home, design's going to have to get a little bit more dedicated than just using standard tables or standard templates of design.
This is why I can see electricians specialising with manufacturers and in areas of our industry. I can see that coming. If not, well, it's already here, isn't it?
I agree. Oh, Sean says we're lucky his keyboard broke. He's struggling on his laptop.
Yeah.
So, we are lucky. Okay, move on. Part 6. This is
it's an existing reg, and the note's been deleted.
Note's been deleted, which is yes, right.
It's the 40 milliseconds.
This one, I had a discussion with this just the other night with you and John. So this talks about the need of effective checking of the RCD. But there's a suggestion that the note that tells us about 40 milliseconds at 5i delta n, 5 times 40 milliseconds, has been taken out.
Which it has of the schedule of test results as well.
Yeah. So my concern is it's not been moved anywhere. Now, obviously, in the 17th edition, it was in 415.1 as a note. It then disappeared and it moved to here as a note. But now it's moved and we can't find it anywhere in the proposed, let me know if you've seen it, amendment. So if we now take away the wording of times 5, 40 milliseconds, does that mean that in a few years' time, some manufacturers might start to adjust the way they test RCDs and come up with an alternative? Let's not forget that we had last year the 250 milliamp problem with one manufacturer deciding to go to, was it 61008?
Yeah, 61008 on
one of their
the
alternative
tables.
Test methods.
Yeah, it has one reference to 250 milliamp in the entire standard and a little star that says refer to manufacturers. Yeah. That, in my professional opinion, is not sufficient to then turn and say, well, you can test these at 250 milliamp. Where is your due diligence? Where is your transparency? Where's the information for the installer to understand that?
Yeah. And so for me, for a training perspective, you try to have consistency among everything and every device.
Yeah, don't move the goalposts.
This creates a question that they may play with additional protection later on. And it would be nice to keep it at 40 milliseconds times 5 unless there's a reason not to. There's no reason to remove this. So that's a comment I will be adding. Okie dokie. We've got a couple of snapshots of the model forms.
Yeah, this is more just to spin around, just to show people what's changing.
Just to show, just basically
very minor stuff.
Bit of housekeeping, really.
But you might want to comment on the risk assessment being removed, because the risk assessment, obviously, in 41133, they've removed the exemption risk assessment, which I think is very poor. I agree with maybe a dwelling, but not for commercial industrial. But you might want to comment on that.
This is the RCDs. And so because obviously the RCD is no longer being risk assessed, they've taken that out. I still... Yeah, I mean,
we should have the ability to have control over our installations.
Well, this is why I would say work from the regs. So you can always add a departure and combine it with a risk assessment.
Exactly. So you can still bypass it. So it kind of makes this pointless, but it would be good if they had a common approach.
Okay, nothing going on there.
Nope.
External earth fault loop impedance to earth fault loop impedance.
Yeah, because it may not be external. It may be underneath you.
Yeah, so that's good. We've got here extruded conductor parts is pulled, RCD type. So, okay, yeah, so we now need to obviously start recording the type of RCD, type A, type AC.
That's a good change.
Good change. Important to keep track of that.
Mm-hmm.
This is a simplified schedule. Again, this doesn't make the job easier or quicker. It's just more holistic. Yeah, trying to keep the paperwork easier.
Can I also add that we're doing a webinar on schedule of items inspected next year? Won't be this year because it's quite a long one, and we will not be doing this format. It will be to the current one, which is there's a lot in it. So
yeah. So we're going to go through every single observation just to kind of just chew on it really. Okay, and the EICR dwellings, lovely. 7671. Okay, that's fine. Okay, the following reasons.
Yeah, tell us why. This just comes down to the silliness of guidance note 3 and everyone going it's 5 years or 3 years without give us a reason. The wiring is old and shot, so because of it, I don't recommend 5 years. I recommend every year until this is rewired.
Exactly. A table of frequencies is never a reason. No. They've done that with the 5th edition code of PAT. They've obviously pulled the frequencies out of there. We need to get down that avenue with this. We need to obviously be able to take responsibilities for our decisions. But if I have a report and it says 3 years, and I know that the table recommendation is 5 years, I want to know the reasons that the previous inspector made, so I can then obviously work with those.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, same thing. Earth fault here. RSD type there. It's good. It's nice that they're not doing a complete rewrite of all of this. Observations, recommendations. Minor work has had some significant changes.
I quite like this.
Yeah, any departures as amended. Risk assessment's been retracted. And then we've got here RCD. We've got the EN number, so 61008, 61009, 7288. Type rating and the delta N. AFDD has been added. That's just going to be 62606.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why they just didn't put it in. There's no other type that I know of.
I mean, it's
is that a tease for there is another type, and the 3-phase one will be under a different standard number?
I don't know, but I mean, obviously, my FDD has 62606 and 61009 on there, but that's obviously two different devices.
Yes.
So that is a bit confusing. But here we go. Installation, we've got the test voltage added.
Actually, do you know what, Dave? It may be because you can get modules, 62606 modules that bolt into 61008 RCDs.
So would that make my AFDD a 61008/62606?
Yes, it would.
Would I fit that in there?
No.
Right.
Well,
okay.
you can write both because it is technically both because you get the modules that bolt on. But in the UK, that's a EU thing. In the UK, I think we're just going for AFDD RCBO combined because it makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay. RCD operation. Just a confirmation there.
Installation resistance test voltage, which is good.
Mm-hmm. And the satisfactory button there. Not all AFDs have a test button.
Yeah, that's in relation to the separate modules.
Separate modules that go on to the actual RCDs themselves. Okay. Test results.
Yeah, that's
just a bit of housekeeping there. RCD type is added. I delta N rating, polarity. Yeah. I mean, I would add a comment. I still think that we should be putting the end of the final circuit, short circuit reading in this.
Yes.
To ensure that we have sufficient current for that. I mean, again, you say that there's no times 1 times half here, so that is concern. Manual AFDD test. I don't like that because not every circuit needs an AFDD, so that's just a bit of.
Well, it's functional, isn't it? It's functional. Pushing the button is functional.
I think we should just have a functional column that includes all applicable devices, to be fair.
That's a very good point.
I think. Or we can just, let's have a column, and we can have a column, and we can just scratch out the ones that we've done.
But in fairness, proving functional testing is part of it. So prove the operation of an MCB, an RCD that it physically isolates. Power from all that.
This takes me to a huge problem I've had with 2391 training is they'll go functional, and to them that's pressing the button because that's the tick that they confirm. But as we know, we're testing functional on initial verification is every single thing's functionality. So there's often a crossover, and having a functional check does create confusion there amongst
Chris Ruddock's made a great comment, is no ramp test. I would love to see on this schedule of items inspected ramp test. I would also love to see the maximum earth leakage put for the circuit and the installation. I know Electroform already have it in their certificates. Where you can actually insert the leakage for the installation.
And they have the R1RN, which is great as well.
There you go. People working from the regs.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree. We should have a check of leakage, or we could even have a measurement of leakage. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Part 7. This one passed. We didn't notice this at first, and then you guys picked it up on our previous webinars, and we just want to know why 2.5 meters. Cord set lengths haven't really changed in standards. We want to know why suddenly 0.5 meter closer is okay now. So I don't really have an issue, but I'd like to have some kind of background as to where that's come from.
I can only assume there'll be a guidance note update on this that gives us the reasoning. I can only assume, I think John Ward made a comment on our podcast about eventually watch that distance creep down to where we are in Europe, where they pretty much don't have much distances.
And that kind of brings me to the worry. I mean, yeah.
Once we're full RCD everywhere.
And that's the thing. We made the assumption because of the full RCD protection, we were allowed to obviously lower the reach distance. I mean, yeah. 2.5 meters. Sean says port is confusing. Eddie says reach maybe. I mean, 2.5 is the consideration of arm's reach.
Yeah.
But obviously this is the socket and the appliance could go this way, which really does make arm's reach a concern, for the cord set length.
Yeah, I think these regulations could be worded better. But anywhere where there's a basin or bowl, don't put 230-volt sockets near it.
There are a lot of questions about that, and I'm going to add a comment just to seek further clarification, just to make a change like that. Okay, so 7-Eleven, we've got the TN system requirements for exhibition shows and stands, where we had before the need for it be under supervision of skilled instructed persons, effective means of earthing being confirmed before the connection is made, and we've got this wall of information here. Now, we've covered this in the podcast, and we discussed this at length in the webinars as well, about this new fad to look at these devices that do not exceed 70 volts for 4 seconds, but no longer than 5 seconds, and achieve disconnection. These devices are coming into 7-Eleven and 717. We don't want to go into too much discussion about our opinions on these devices, do we?
Not really. I mean, I think there's just more. I think there's more understanding needed. The one thing I'm learning and realizing more and more, and that is if you have an EV charging unit and you're not putting in some form of local earth reference, then yeah. I mean, the IET EV Go to Practice even has where you have these devices with this open network technology in it that you should still have on certain conditions a local earth electrode, which I don't think some installs have been done like that.
No,
but
it's a concern that we've got really because of these devices that we're looking at, and we're looking at a lot of these devices, and they do achieve some form of protection, but they also create some other form of risk.
Yeah,
so we're just seeking further learning before we have regulations like this thrown at us with this.
Yeah, well, we're looking into the divided neutral current broken pen issue at the moment. EV, for me, I'm not going to really worry too much or look into it for a few years, to be honest with you, because I just don't think we know enough about the networks we're connected into. So start there first.
But that is the problem, is we're relying heavily on the device, but we don't really know about the integrity of the system it's being used on. And we're looking at the systems, not the devices right now. And we're finding more and more issues as we look. Mm-hmm. This one was fun because this regulation 722.826 is going to be rewarded with a comment because .826 doesn't exist in the proposed document.
Yep.
So that's just... so it creates some kind of confusion. It's referring to it's a supplementary requirement, 722, of a regulation that we don't have the original part of.
Yep.
Yeah. So that just creates a problem straight off. So there's clearly a cock up here at some point. Okay. So that's why we're going to comment on that one.
But it is pretty much in reference to what we said about the whole pen technology stuff. That's what that's about.
Yeah.
It just references forward. It's the first regulation that references forward in the regs.
It does, because it's obviously talking about part 8 in part 7. But okay, so with part 8, firstly we're going to mention is functional requirements, H21. This is H2. 8.1, energy efficiency, was in the public draft of the first 18th edition, got shelved. Appendix 17 came in, But 60364-8-81 or -8-1, I can't remember what the numbering is, carried on, and that is another standard right now. So the question really here is, why can't we just have all of what they require us to look into at once instead of having little sections of that? Now, we don't want to go through all this, Paul, do we?
No, this is the section that finally introduces the whole prosumer term. If you're not familiar, it's a producer and consumer of energy, henceforth the new term. Again, it's lots of new definitions. I'm not really going to comment on new definitions because they're new. They're brought in from other standards. Prosumer's electrical installation, PEI. It's a new term for that scenario in the picture. Basically, as you can see, installations are going to be flow and return. They're going to be in and out. It's generate and consume. So
so we've got other terms. We've got the island moding, which is the idea of you being completely disconnected from the grid but you remain energized. And we have connected modes, and we've got direct feeding modes, and we've got reverse feeding mode, which is what it sounds like, so you can take from the network and then you can give back to the network. All of this is managed with an EEMS, an electrical energy management system. And some of you may be seeing this already if you're installing EV. You may use someone like Zappi, and they'll have their software, and it'll show you how much power you're using and how much of that is coming from your solar, how much of that is coming from the grid, how much of that is going onto your car, how much this is the point. A lot of this is already happening, but now we're talking about the scalability of the entire system.
This part 8 is going to be fascinating because every single one of us are going to have to go on a whole journey understanding this better. And without a doubt, this is going to mean another course to do. This is definitely an update on the City and Guilds because it's a large, chunky document. And remember, this is part 8, part 82. 81 was in the 18th edition draft for public comment and got removed. And now it refers to it as a separate standard. So you've got to go and buy, to get chapter 81, you've got to go and buy it as a separate standard, which is a bit of a disappointment, to be honest with you.
And there's 83, which I think is the management of prosumer or something?
Yes.
So there's a lot more than what you already see in 8 right now to come in. And I agree that there's a lot more to take in. And I'd rather they just kind of tried to do that all at once, but brought it in as a new approach, new qualification. The regulations book, maybe it needs to be broken down into 2 bits. Does 8 come into the fundamental principles of part 1? Is the fundamental principles of part 1 staying fundamental principles?
I think it's fair to evident if you look at 60364 part 1, it has been revised, and there is a lot. We've kind of predicted this before, but part 1 is going to need a rewrite. And if you look at 60364 part 1, it has been rewritten to encompass this EEMS. In fact, EEMS is referenced in part 1, and no doubt in the Amendment 3 or the 19th edition, depending on how long we need this to bed in, because anything new that comes in has to bed in, be adopted, trial and error, improved, and then it becomes normal, like RCDs, 20-year journey with RCDs, haven't we really? Even though they've been out longer, they've normalised in the last 20 years. So this is stuff that we're going to be on a journey with our whole careers. But
my concern with that, Paul, is pace. Look at, for example, the government right now saying, electric vehicles, we're having such a push of pace because of the need to comply. I think next year is it in Glasgow, the whole, what's that COP called? The climate change thing is in Glasgow, and they want next year. I read a letter from the SSE director to that lady, you put on Instagram that God, I should really revise this. The Department for Transport.
Oh yeah,
Rachel something. She did an audit, and it wasn't very good, was it?
No, it was terrible.
Yeah, the damning right. Well, I found a letter written to her by the director of SSE, and they're trying to push for the targets to be that we have a much larger infrastructure of EV charging by 2025, so that we're ready for the 2030 push. And we have all these targets pushing, and I can see this also happening with this, where it's going to be pushed aggressively, and we may find that we can't keep up. You know, and
I think this is why I'm staying away from EV, because I think there's going to be there's going to be a gold rush for EV installs. However, the one thing that probably won't get publicised is the mop up for EV installs. And there will be people who will build their businesses solely around going around fixing and mopping up EV installs where people have got tingles off their cars, or things have happened, or they're not compliant. We already know from the report where they did sampling of the OLEV registered contractors, there was a large percentage that needed to go back and fix the work. Again, the report, nothing to do with us. This is a report that's gone out to all those installers. So, and also the grid and the various other companies that are involved with the grid, of course they want EV rolled out. Why? Because it's an opportunity to enhance and upgrade the infrastructure and take the smart benefits to understand where they need to target this.
Well, this letter in particular was all about the idea of fleet, about them pushing all of their fleet, or 300 of their fleet, to be EV, and they need to have the support infrastructure. And it was from SSC, obviously, who are up in Scotland as well. And they're saying, even up there, we can do that, but we want the government support to push in the infrastructure to get the charging in.
It's because they want private investment.
To meet a 2025 target, so that by 2025 we have the electric vehicle structure. We've seen this one open just this week, which is 100% off clean energy used, although it's connected to the grid.
But let me put it across: if the government have this target, the money's going to be there, and it may be that this EV thing is a chance to massively invest heavily in the grid network and try and remove losses and have a smart grid. It's got to be done somehow. Politically, it probably is being spun in various ways. But Sean's made a good comment. No smart grid in place to deal with demand, in his opinion.
And this is the point, Sean. I mean, this one that's just opened. Where was it? This 100% 36 charging ports. You knew it.
Oh, Braintree. Essex. Yeah.
They've got a 6. Is it like a 6 megawatt battery or something? But fundamentally, they're connected to the grid because there are periods where their demand will be too large that they can't cope with what they generate, and so they're going to come off the grid for a period of time, and they'll pull a lot off of the grid. And so that grid suitable for that? Now, they claim to be carbon neutral because there's 40 miles away or so, there's a farm that every unit they take off the grid, they'll put back on the farm. So they'll claim to be carbon neutral. They are still dependent on that grid, though. So I'm just looking for a quick search to answer a question. It'll be... Lawrence, your question there, it'll be 60364-8-81, I think, mate. Okay.
An 82 and 83.
An 82 and 83. I was just trying to find the numbering on my phone, but Google keeps thinking I'm looking for a sum. Yeah. So, there's a couple of good links going in here. Yeah, myths about electric vehicles. And
Fantastic.
I mean... This is, again, as Paul said, this is, money is spinning, it's pushing. And so my concern is money will push this as well, because this will equal, meeting targets. But are we prepared? Are we competent enough? Are we supported enough by the industry? Or will the industry just push it into, or maybe the industry may even retrain other people and ignore the electricians altogether to do some of this work, which is another concern.
Yeah, Sean said, if anyone's put links in, can you make sure they're to all people, not just the panelists? Good point. Thanks, Sean.
Oh, yeah. Eddie, could you put those links in for attendees as well, please? Yeah, so, I mean, we didn't want to go through all of this Part 8 and comment on all of that. We were going to just have a discussion about Part 8 in general.
It's the one with the most questions, because we've all got to develop and improve our knowledge on it. To be honest with you, there's loads of new terms, and it is a bit of a headache. It's quite a large pill to swallow, to be honest with you. So, but it's the future. It's smart technologies. It's just it's the nature of the beast, to be honest with you.
So, any questions on this? Eddie says networks reckon we can change all domestic cars tomorrow. Grid maybe not to house. Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, I don't disagree, because if in theory, if they changed every house, every car to a EV car, you would effectively have a local grid, wouldn't you? You'd have a massive battery farm, nationally, which would be its own grid. That's why they're probably saying that, but they wouldn't like it if everyone plugged in at the same time. This is why it needs to be smart to regulate energy.
And I think this is the problem. Is we know that obviously the it gets rid of obviously the combustion, great. But if we can't produce an efficient amount for that demand and store that demand, we're going to have to take it off of the grid, and the grid is going to struggle. So we need to produce it quickly. We need to store it quickly. That's where this comes in.
Yeah.
We've not, interestingly enough, though, they didn't push into this 721 and 716, power over Ethernet and the battery storage. That was interesting. I'm surprised it didn't come in there, because that's going to have to come in at some point, because there's mention in 82 about storing, but we haven't got regulations on
this. But then
those requirements.
Again, Dave, this comes down to the point where I generally think eventually at some point it would be wise, and again, it's only my personal opinion, chapters 7 and 8 become a separate BS7671 part 2 to allow them to expand, to give us all the information, because it's getting more complex, it's getting more technical. There's nothing we can do to avoid that, to be honest with you.
No. And we've only, again, that one in part 7 was the only regulation that looks forward to 8. And so as long as that's all that's happening, that can easily be done.
This is an interesting one, though. This is one that blew my brains, was when John was looking at this, the protection against electric shock. If you have 2 different earthing systems and you're switching from mode to mode, will you need 2 different devices, 2 levels of protection?
Well, you're going to have 2 different fault characteristics, aren't you?
Yes, you are.
So, yes, it's just like you're right now working with a standby generator. Whenever you have an alternative supply, the final circuit now needs to have the characteristics to disconnect for ADS by both supplies.
Yeah.
So that's another area.
The favourite one to look at, if anybody's wondering, is if you ever have a UPS that's feeding a distribution board for, say, emergency lighting, it's worth checking to see if the inverter will generate sufficient fault current to trip the breaker under fault if someone's connected to it. That was an interesting one about 15 years ago on the railways. They were producing UPSs that wouldn't trip a Type C 10 amp breaker. Pointless.
Type C 10 amp. Oh, so 100 amp. Jesus.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even trip that. Nope. Well, Martin says, a friend of mine's dad is involved with the world's shell development of EV installs, and the stations and they are getting a 500 mil fund from the government.
Not surprised.
Not surprised. Yeah.
The fact of the matter is part 8 is happening. Yeah. Stuff's getting smarter. Technology's getting quicker. It's becoming more consumable, disposable. We are in that golden era, and not such an era since the days when electrical installations started going into houses, where they're emerging and developing into these smart automated homes.
Very much like you're seeing in the news now that we're in a new era for vehicles, that everyone now is at the beginning of a change, and they're saying be at the front, be the trendsetter, because everyone's going to have to do it, and it has. They're making it illegal from 2030. The same thing's happening here for electrical systems, is that we're having to change.
Well, I've just fitted a gas boiler, brand new combi, so that's going to be my last gas boiler in my lifetime. But as far as smart home, I've allowed for an electric vehicle charging point and connection to earth. But for me, I'm staying with sockets and switches.
Yeah, and as Andy has just said, right, and we've said this in our podcast, you can either be the kind that moans about it, doesn't read it, doesn't pay attention to it, until one day you realise you don't actually you're not compatible with your own industry anymore.
Yeah, you become a dinosaur.
You are going
Don't get me wrong. And from a generational perspective, there are guys watching this, or maybe who will go, well, I'll be gone by the time this really impacts. And you're absolutely right. We will always need to maintain and upgrade and replace what we've got. But it's fairly evident in the last 10 years that I've been looking at the regs, I dread what the 19th edition is going to have in store for us. And yet me and you kind of already know, we've got an idea it's going to get even more complex, more information.
And that's pretty much why we're kind of saying we're going to slow down with our podcast moving forward, because we've got a crap load of work to do.
Yeah, it's too much. They've got to be fun. They've got to be of value.
Yeah. But we've got so much work to do, looking at the regulations and looking at the future, to make sure that anything we do
is of value,
helps us all with this. Because Eddie says, you've got to move with it, or get lost. Your own choice. My concern is how the industry will bring us through this journey, because I just feel that there'll be little mentions of things, and then there will be insufficient support to properly develop their competence.
My concern is the industry you reference to is potentially just private for-profit companies who will direct where they want people to be rather than where they need to be.
Yeah,
that's a concern.
Yeah. So, okay, let's push through a couple of these. Overcurrent, yeah. Short circuit currents, all points of the consumer electrical installation, yeah. Island moding.
Disconnecting power due requirements of switching devices. Yeah. This is all, as what we just said, making sure that each method of generation and earthing is suitable for whichever mode we use.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mind mess.
SPDs required, that makes sense. Yeah. And then there's this one here, energy storage, inrush currents, and other capabilities when switching between modes. Yes, so there's going to be a very clever switching device here.
Yes. Yeah, there'll be some sort of static switch for the domestic home, I think.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, where you can plug the DNO in and you can plug your prosumer generation stuff in, and it then feeds the board. That's how I'm assuming you would do it, is 2 feeds into one box. That then comes out in tails, feeds your board. That board is selected and directed for DC immunity and everything else, and we've served.
Yeah, makes sense. Loading generators and load shedding. Yes, so it might be that we end up with systems where we switch over to our battery stored, and then the systems will then adjust the way our circuits consume the power. It might be that we switch over to a battery storage system and our lighting changes its levels or something. There's all sorts of clever ways that we can try to extend life if our supply changes from an imported supply to a private static supply.
Eddie's made a comment about we will be ditching the supplier's earth, I suspect, in favour of TT. Eddie, I completely agree. I think the whole evolution of foundation electrodes is we will be. And again, this islanding mode, we know it exists in North America and Canada, where they generate their own power supply if they lose the network and they lose the earthing. So I generally do think we're going to have to, I think it was a Canadian regulations, the latest amendment, removed the word neutral. So now you've got, and in theory, if you are switching the earthing, you are grounding all your neutral return. You're not putting it back to transformer, it's just going and dissipating into the earth, which again becomes another problem, but I expect that around the 19th edition.
Yeah, sorry, that was Chris's comment. Yeah, I agree.
Apologies, needing glasses.
We've done a lot of work looking at PME, and we've got a lot of, the more we look at it, the more problems we're finding, and the life expiry of it. Well, is PME anymore? Is basically where we're coming to, or is TNS anymore?
Well, we know TNS isn't well in my area it isn't.
It isn't. Writing. So TNS isn't TNS, it's PME, but PME isn't very reliable. So the outcome.
And remember, PME is the protective application for the cable, the supply, so that it's technically TNC, and PME is the earthing measure, and that's down to whether or not the DNO have maintained and installed as and when they've made the alteration. That's an interesting debate.
Yeah, so you probably have a load of TNS systems that are TNC systems that are not PME.
Yeah, they're more than likely PNB, to be honest with you. But we know that because I've actually watched my TNS systems be converted to PME without them actually informing me in any way, shape, and form, other than me asking loads of questions about their own standards. Which was fun.
Okie dokie. Electric vehicle charging, both a load and storage device not permanently connected should be managed by the energy management system.
Yeah, Sam Cook's nailed it. The speed it will travel, the companies will undertake changes are of a concern. If you don't move it, you get left behind. Doesn't mean you have to enjoy or agree with all of it, though. Sam, I am so with you on this. I personally think we could do this better in phased approaches. But again, that would need the manufacturers to be told, just hold on a minute.
Yeah, my problem is this. I think that it can be that we have, I think it can be a very exciting new way of designing systems, working with systems, installing systems, but I worry about the way it's delivered, the way it's handed over, or the way it's guided. And I get the feeling it'll just be rushed, and it'll be we have a lot of people doing installs or doing things that won't know enough detail about why they're doing it, and a lot will just detach from the regulations and just follow guidance or common references. So that's my concern. It will be fast. It will be fast, and that my concern is that speed will overrule the development of competence.
Now, this is the thing: is this Chapter 8 changes the rules of the game, and this is why I think more needs doing. Because if you look at, I'm just looking at Chapter 8 now on the DPC, magnitude of overcurrent 826121. Bear with me here. overload and short circuit current shall be determined at every point of the prosumer's electrical installation where a device shall be installed. Is that in the schedule of items inspected?
No.
No, it's not.
Again, a lot of people just think do the minimum.
There you go. There's a comment, 826121. If they're going to introduce it, they need to amend the certificate. I've just found that right now. There you go. There's a comment for everyone. 86121. Magnitude of overcurrent.
Yeah.
If we're doing that, we need someone to record it. The certificate doesn't reflect the requirements of Chapter 8.
No, the certificate doesn't. So there should be extra certification for this chapter.
Absolutely. And that should be in the DPC. Otherwise, this technically shouldn't be in there then.
Yeah, we can agree to this, but we don't know how it's going to be recorded or controlled.
Indeed.
Okie dokie. Selectivity, yeah, downstream devices operates, upstream devices does not. So we've got to look at selective agreements. Bear in mind, power goes both ways here.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Selectivity when power goes both ways comes more fun here, upstream or downstream, depending on the mode. There you go. Testing and verification. Loop impedance test instruments may not work properly with inverters. Alternative methods of determining loop impedance and fault current. Does that just mean calculate?
Yeah, that scares me.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That would just be calculation, a simple example, some generic examples handed over, and there'll be a lack of knowledge here.
So in my opinion, inverters and electronics should be able to withstand a few things. One is a grid outage and restore to a point of normal operation without the need for human intervention. Yep. And two, they should be able to withstand electrical installation fault current testing. Otherwise, we shouldn't be installing them. Mm-hmm. If they're that delicate and sensitive, why are we installing this stuff?
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, that was actually the last slide, I think.
Okay.
Let me have a look-see. There we go. So, yeah, this obviously presentation was done before in a lot more depth with Paul, John, and I. You can go watch those videos on the YouTube channels. We've just covered some of the areas that we think are more interesting than others. 8, though, there's a couple of comments that you've found, actually, which is good, which isn't really a against. It's more of a we need more information in Part 8. I think we cannot comment that Part 8 should just go away.
No.
That's not going to work.
I think we'd be foolish if we did that. I think Part 8 needs to happen. Can it be improved? Can it be better? Could they potentially take... Is it Appendix 18 would have got energy efficiency? Maybe that could work its way back into
17.
Part 8. 17, sorry.
Yeah.
It could work its way back in.
Well, that was 8.1, wasn't it? That was the 8.1. Then they took some parts of 8.1 and they put it into 17. We really could have done with having 8.1 back, so we could just go, okay, look, what is it? And let's just take it on board. Let's look at this and this and this.
I would hope training providers, if they are going to do training courses on this, there needs to be at least a day or two just on the teachings of Part 8 and the appendix, associate appendix, to really enable guys to start getting their heads around all of this stuff, because it's okay for us because we're constantly researching it. So slowly but surely we talk and we develop our understanding of it. But if you're by yourself and you're just being asked to do all this, it's very overwhelming. So hopefully the training sector will produce something pretty decent to help people. Yeah. If not, we'll just have to do more webinars.
Well, I foresee that we will be doing a lot more when it comes to this area. Once we get, right now the electric vehicle industry is moving so fast. We're not trying to keep up with it. We've let it run off, and we're not really paying too much attention to it because we've seen a couple of things, and we're not confident in how everything's worked out right now.
Yeah.
My concern is this can happen with this as well, as this may look at electric vehicles as ways a lot of it has been done. So there is a risk that we're just going to fall behind. We need to keep up. Eddie's put in a question here for 702 swimming pools. Let me just read this. 702.11, scope, object, and fundamental principles. Okay, the particular requirements of this section apply to basins and swimming pools, basins of fountains, and basins of paddling pools. Yep. Particular requirements also apply to surrounding zones of these basins. In these areas, in normal use, the risk of electric shock is increased by reduction in body resistance. Yes. Okay, this is Eddie's question. I work in a lot of churches which have full immersion baptismal fonts for adults. My brother got baptized in one of those, actually. Similar to 8-foot swimming pools. The description in scope says swimming pools and other basins, yet the zoning and other seems to exclude all other except fountains and basins above ground. I don't expect the regs to allow for all scenarios. What I expect is that they should be non-inclusive of other scenarios. That's an interesting point.
Sorry, wait a minute. Okay. Churches have full immersion baptismal fonts.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it shows how much I go to church.
Yeah,
Lots of baptism I went to, it was just a standard one where they dunked the baby's head.
Baby in a bowl. Now they have, my brother did when he was like 21. He stands there and they just dump him backwards and lift him up. So he went fully under and there. Yeah.
You just get the vicar to take you to the pool and just chuck you in.
So his question is, basically, he doesn't. I don't expect the regs to allow for all scenarios. So you think that would be too precise? What I expect is that they should be non-inclusive of other scenarios.
It's a good question.
Yeah,
good question, Eddie. Again, I don't think I would look at the fountain or the basin. I would probably be looking at what's around it and what measures I need to take. Because if I was putting these into an existing church, I'm assuming they would be a retrofit into an existing church, then I would be looking at what's around it and is there any risk of touch potential, extension needs, etc., and what additional measures do I need to make an alteration addition to bring it into a level of reasonably practicable compliance.
I guess the way I read it, I would read that as a basin. I would read that as a basin, or I'd have to find a way to interpret it to be a basin, then I could apply those requirements for zoning.
I'm going to have a look at it, actually. It's a good one.
Because they can't be too specific for every scenario. You're right, but we'd have to kind of say, right, well, that's close to as close to a basin as we can get, or something. But yeah, it'd be nice if they kind of gave us that freedom. Chris says, I remember a church near me with one and that, and they had immersion heaters on floats that plugged in the sockets. You're joking, aren't you? Immersion heaters on floats.
Oh dear Lord. Well,
there you go.
It's the one place to ask for help, I suppose, isn't it? It's your time, as they say.
Maybe they didn't have enough bookings for funerals.
I don't have any competence when it comes to churches. I don't go into them that much.
Me neither.
I used to. I was a choir boy at one point in my life, but never thought I'd imagine an adult baptism. So that's totally thrown me. First I've heard of that. Wow.
Well, you could add a comment on that, Eddie, couldn't you? You could add a comment to the 7201.scope and just say, look, can we have a bit more openness to basins?
It's a real shame, though. Eddie said if it's not in the regs, people argue against it. But I think this leads to the argument that there could be some narrative that says, please use this as a minimum guide, work from the reg. But it does actually say that, doesn't it, at the start of it?
It does.
It says use your own engineering judgment.
The problem is people are too matter of fact. Instead of going, it's not, it doesn't say that word for word. They should actually look at what it's trying to achieve. If you look at for the objective of the book, the protections being achieved in the scenario given, you can easily relay that scenario to a number of other areas, such as this one. But if you go with matter of fact, it's not there black and white, which we do have to do sometimes when we start debating regulations. We end up, the regs don't work for us.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree at all.
Hot tubs, yeah, Sean. Yeah, a lot more common. Okay. All right, so we've discussed a couple of ones that we're going to make comments on. Definitely making a comment on A26121 there about the lack of documentation forms and stuff in Part 8. I'm not going to do any comments on Part 8 specifically, though, because I am ready to concede that these changes have to come in. So me putting comments to say anything about anything else is not going to get me anywhere. My concerns more there aren't about the regulations, aren't about the standardization. It's more about the industry itself and the way it's going to actually cope with this. And that's where my concern is. It's not with the regulations themselves. I'm going to add a comment on the AFDDs. I'm going to add a comment on the overvoltage device wording. Probably, I'm not going to worry about the risk assessment.
Just go back into Eddie's comment. Page 2, at the very start of the book, it says the publisher and contributors believe the information and guidance is correct. All parties must rely on their own skill and judgment while making use of it. That's not new. That's in the current one. The publisher and contributors do not assume liability. Fair enough, because we have to work from this book. It then does, though, which I find quite interesting, is publication does not purport to include all the necessary provisions of a contract. Users are responsible. Compliance with a British standard cannot confer immunity from legal obligations. So if you're arguing, you're then arguing your duty of care, your provision and use of workplace equipment, for instance, if you're in a church. Have you proved compliance? Have you taken all reasonable steps? It's a difficult one, but you have to argue with like the subtext on page 2 and reference that. So it's not just reg numbers.
Yeah. So Eddie says he's had people argue it, saying it's not in the regs, but he says to me it's the same as a swimming pool, and that's technically. I mean,
yeah, I agree with that.
You've got a person, member of the public, completely immersed in water. Yeah. Definitely. I had a similar scenario where I had a fountain in my village near me. Thankfully, there's no electrical in there anymore, but a fountain near me, it's a fountain. And if you look at the fountain requirements, there's no zone 2. And in the fountain requirements, there's less precautions. There's less application of self-restriction. There's less application of equipment requirement because they consider persons won't occupy that space. And the local fountain near me, people go in there in the really warm summertime amongst all the duck shit and stuff. But now we have to consider that can be an area occupied by persons, and that is in the scope of 7671, a swimming pool by default. So yeah, if persons are going in there, members of the public, submerged, then I'd agree with you, Eddie, on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But there are people that are very matter of fact, and this is where your knowledge of the application of BS 7671 is key. And if you can use 7671 accurately, then you're fine. We can't use it word for word. We have to sometimes be creative or a bit. We have to combine our competence or our engineering judgment with the regulations. But as long as we fall back onto safe work in compliance with 761, as it falls back onto a safe system, then 7671 will always work for you. So yeah, go with that, mate. Yeah, you'll get argued. There are a lot of people that will just, moan about it not being word for word in the regs. You'll get a lot of people that think they know the regs word for word. And those who do know it word for word, great, but then they need to know how to use it.
Anyone who argues with me and says that's not in the regs, I say it, but it is in our duty of care.
Yeah.
That's my response. It's in our duty of care.
There's a big difference between knowing how to. This is again the issue with the exam. There's a big difference between knowing how to find a regulation and actually knowing what it's trying to do and what the objective is. Yeah. And if we understand that, then we're fine with that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you are a subcontractor and you're arguing with a client and they say that's not in the wiring regs, one, it's your duty of care as electrical contractor to take all reasonable steps, and two, it's the client's duty, or again, Health and Safety at Work Act, I think it's Regulation 3, to provide a safe place of work and equipment. And if you want to argue more, go into PURE as well.
Yeah, PURE.
Start beating them to death with legislation.
Yeah.
Soon shut them up.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a nice one. Right. We are ready to wrap this up, guys. If there's any other questions, throw them in now into chat and let us know.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You've got tonight, you've got tomorrow, and we think midnight on Friday. So you've got Friday as well to put your comments down. If you have any issues with doing that, send us a message and we can give you a little opinion on, what we think of things. But these are your comments, your opinions. It's up to you. All right. Okay, you guys must be knackered. Yes, we are. Yes. But we kind of feel that some of this is something we have to help and take part in.
This is one of the few occasions we get to actually question and challenge and discuss the industry and maybe influence it. So,
all right. Everyone's just saying thank you. There's no other questions. All right, Paul. Thank you for your time, buddy.
Cheers, mate.
And, so before we finish, two things. All right, for those guys who haven't left yet. First thing, webinar, Tuesday, fire. Second thing, little appeal. If any of you haven't heard about our wonderful brother, Paul Skirm, who's not very well, we are trying to raise some funds to help him get home and get back to work. And he is the man that actually steers us on the right path whenever we have any issues. We've mentioned him a couple of times in this webinar today. And we can't finish without actually just saying thank you for everyone who has already given us a very generous support trying to get him to get home and get back to work and make any changes needed for him to get back to what he does best, which is basically boss us around and tell us what we should be doing properly.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be able to do this without him putting us back on the rails and giving us direction, and we want to get him home, get him well, get him safe. And everyone who's helped so far, thank you very much. Anyone who hasn't heard about that, he's not very well. If you search any of my social media or E5, one of the first things you'll find will be a little post about him, and it's a Just Giving page that we've got going.
There's a link on the Instagram main profile.
Yeah.
You click on it, Just Giving, and there's a small story there about his cancer. So
he's a very important man to us, and he's a very important man to this industry. You know, and a lot of people don't really know what who he helps, because he doesn't ask for thanks. He doesn't boast about it.
No,
he makes
a very humble Welshman.
He's a very humble man, and he makes a huge difference to all of us. Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you for everyone. Oh, Sean, thank you. There's a link there. All right. Please consider. I know this is a bad year. It's a horrible year. So if you can't, maybe you can just share it to help and get, just share it so that we can get other people helping, just so we can kind of just give him extra confidence that he can get back home, make some changes. And he wants to get back to work. That is what the man is like. He wants to get home, be able to be independent and get to work. That's what he'll do. And we can really do with him working in this industry. We'll be benefiting a lot from him. Any last words from you, mate?
No, not really. Please give what you can for Paul, really. That's all I can say.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Goodbye.